at the end. Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. So I am Megan Williams. I work with the MD PhD program, or the MSTP at Vanderbilt. And so I do admissions and recruiting with the program, as well as some other things to help train our students. I run a summer research program as well for undergraduates. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about our program. Certainly feel free to ask questions. Yeah, we'll kind of go from there. So I guess stepping back, just in case there's kind of varying levels of awareness of the MD PhD training and why someone might choose to do that. So an MD PhD program is really made to train people who are going to be physician scientists. So the idea is that you're going to do research, you're going to have an active research program where you're investigating, translational basic science research, typically where you're trying to learn more about how diseases are working and find, potential avenues for new treatments. But then you're also going to be seeing patients. And so a lot of times you'll see patients in the clinic, that are related to the research that you're doing in the lab. And physicians will sometimes get frustrated because they aren't able to really help all of their patients that they're able to help. And they want to be able to contribute to that in a way that they can more thoroughly than if they were just physicians. And so that's why their interest in kind of a physician scientist career might arise. So these are people who are very interested in research as well as medicine. They probably spend more than 50%, as much as 80% of their time doing research. And then the rest of it could be clinical time. So it's definitely more significant research focus than it is clinical time. And so that's something where you really want to make sure you like research as well. And you'll get both degrees. One other kind of nomenclature thing, we talk about the MSTP versus MD PhD programs. So MSTP typically refers to programs who have a training grant from the NIH. So those programs are called medical scientist training programs, just additional funding to support their program. All MSTPs or medical scientist training programs are MD PhD programs, but not all MD PhD programs are going to be an MSTP. So that's why you might kind of hear both of those terms. We are an MSTP. We are funded by the NIH as well. So this is just a little bit about our curriculum. And I think this is one of the unique aspects of our program. About almost 10 years now, our medical school redid their curriculum. So this has been in place a while, but it definitely has some advantages for our MSTP students. So our medical school curriculum has just 1 year of preclinical knowledge. So your first year you'll spend in Foundations of Medical Knowledge. That year is all preclinical coursework. It's where you're going to learn all of the science and anatomy and everything that you need to know to kind of set yourself up for the future clinical years. It's really meant to be a foundation. As we talk about, you're not going to be able to learn everything that you could possibly need to know in 1 or 2 years of medical school. So we give you the important content that you need. We teach it in a really integrated format. So you're going to learn about anatomy as the same, and physiology, things that, how they normally work, along with related pathologies at the same time in different types of body systems. So it's really integrated to kind of cut down on instruction time and help you tie everything together. You also, in that first year, will go into the clinic once a week as part of a clinical team, and you'll stay with that team throughout your entire first year. So you do get early clinical exposure as well. In your second year of medical school, you do Foundations of Clinical Care, and that is actually your clerkship year. So you do all of your clerkships prior to going to graduate school. So these are your required rotations in medicine, surgery, OB-GYN, pediatrics, psych, neuro, as well as some elective time. You will do lab rotations before you start medical school and in the summer in between the first and second year of medical school. We have additional spots for more lab rotations if needed, but we do require these two by everybody. After your second year of medical school, you'll select a graduate program. You'll study and take your step 1 and sometimes even your step 2 board exam. That's kind of up to you a little bit of how you schedule that, but you definitely need to take that time to take one of them there. And then you'll join graduate school, and we have about 16 graduate programs that we offer through the MD PhD program. And on average, it takes about 4 years to do your PhD through our program. It can definitely vary depending on how your research goes, but you have typically about 4 years. As far as those 16 PhD programs, we offer pretty much anything in biomedical sciences that you could think of, but we also have some less traditional options like biomedical engineering, health policy, and epidemiology, and biomedical informatics as well. Throughout this time in graduate school, you will go back into the clinic. We call this our clinical preceptorship program, about once a month. So you've already done your clerkships here, so you have a lot of clinical skills. So we don't want you to forget them. We also want you to be able to grow on them and then further explore different clinical session or clinical interests throughout graduate school. So this program will allow you to go back in the clinic once a month with a clinical preceptor who you've chosen in an area that you've chosen to pursue further. Throughout our entire time in the program, we have this MSTP seminar series. So every Wednesday, all of our students in all of our years will get together for journal club presentations, research in progress, and other career and professional development presentations. So we really appreciate that our students are all coming together every week. It's a really great time to form community in our program. We also have this clinical immersion year, which is going to be your final year of medical school. And so you see here that there are just 3 years of medical school. Our regular medical students will have 2 clinical immersion years. These years are mostly a group of bunch of different clinical electives. It's really where you're going to take courses now specific to your clinical interests. Our regular medical students do a research project as part of their 2 clinical immersion years. And our MD PhD students are able to get credit for their graduate research, so they only have to do 1 of these clinical immersion years. So if you have a 4-year PhD, it is definitely possible to finish the program in 7 years. If it takes you a little longer in your PhD, then you'll finish in 8 years, which is the more typical time frame. So you're still kind of, finishing on a normal time point. So this can definitely allow you to get done sooner if your PhD goes well. I just wanted to highlight a few things that we think are some strengths of our program. One of those things I've talked about, we have this innovative curriculum that lets you get into the clinic a lot sooner. It allows you to explore your clerkships before graduate school, so you don't wait till you're all the way done with your PhD for having your intense clinical training, and it really lets you have more time throughout graduate school to explore what you want to go into for your clinical specialty. We also have a really strong community and culture within the Vanderbilt MSTP. We have a lot of formal ways that we have our students get to know each other. We have, let me see what the next one says. Okay. We have these advising colleges that you end up being a part of, both through medical school and the MSTP. And they are essentially groups of students where there's 4 different colleges. So you'll be a part of one college, and there'll be students above you in your college and within your class, and there'll be faculty advisors. And it really allows you to get to know a smaller group of students better. And we have some coursework and some social events where you'll hang out kind of in your college. You'll have mentors in your college as well. And so these are just some examples of, down here at the bottom, actually what we like to call family dinners. So each of our, student mentors has a mentor, and they create these mentoring families, and we provide funding for the families and the colleges to do social activities together. So these are just groups of students who've gone on family dinners sponsored by the MSTP together. I like to point this picture out because I took this one day just randomly outside of where our office space is. Over on the wall you can't see here are the offices for the MSTP. And like my office is right here, and some of our other team members. And this is just a group of students organically hanging out in our space outside of the offices. We have people in different years talking to each other. I think this group is actually a big little pair. There is someone studying for a STEP exam. This is someone who at the time was an M4. So there's just a lot of activity where people come together, they help each other, and they support each other. And that's something that we really strive for in our program, and through a lot of formal programming and support for them to do social events together, financial support for that. This is a really strong culture that we've developed. Along with that is mentorship. So I talked a bit about the big little mentoring and the family mentoring that occurs within these advising colleges. There's also faculty advisors associated with all those advising colleges. And then our leadership team is a really large group of 8 different people who are meant to support you. throughout your training, and you can go to any one of them with questions, and there's a lot of support there as well. Vanderbilt students certainly feel like they are well supported, have a lot of people that they can go to if they need something. Another aspect that we value is leadership development. So we try to have our students that come in that are kind of interested in the idea of leadership and giving back to the program. And through serving on student programming committees and different types of student organizations, our students will develop leadership skills that they can then take into their future career. We also do 2 leadership workshops that you'll be required to attend throughout your time in the program to help you learn more about leadership skills and teamwork that you can then take into your career as leaders in science and medicine. And so that's something that we think is a really important aspect of our program as well. Just going to talk a little bit about the types of things that we'll look for in students or applicants. So research experience, of course, that's really important. As I said, you'll be doing the significant amount of your professional career will be in research. And so we want you to know that you want to go into research, that this is the career that you want. We'll, of course, look at things like your academic preparation for medical school, such as your MCAT or your GPA or your courses taken. We'll look at leadership potential, as I mentioned. We really want students who are involved, in undergrad, so that when they come to Vanderbilt, they can show that they're going to be involved in what we've got as well. These can be different things. It doesn't have to be science or medicine. It can include, your extracurricular activities and your service. Just well-balanced, well-rounded students are the types of things that we look for. In addition, we have, we'll look for a little bit for clinical exposure. So you're going to go to medical school and be a physician as well. So we need to make sure that's something that you want to do. This can be a mix of different things. There are a lot of ways to get clinical exposure. And basically at the end of the day, you want to be sure that you want to work with patients, that you know what a physician does, and that that's a career that you want. We realized that over the last few years, it certainly will have been more challenging to get clinical exposure, and applicants might have a bit less of that. We still just need you to be able to explain in your application that you want that job, you understand what physicians do, and you enjoy working with patients. We'll look at letters of recommendation, especially from research advisors. And we really want them to talk about people or your potential for success as a physician scientist. Excuse me. So make sure that they know that you're applying to MD, PhD programs instead of just medical school, so that they can address both of those aspects. We also will look at, why are you doing MD, PhD? Do you understand what this career means, what you're getting into? Is this something that, you are aware of kind of what the challenges might be, what the pathway looks like? Why do you need to do this type of training versus just MD or just PhD only? We will also, look for some of these different types of qualities. We look for students who are bright, motivated, independent, curious, creative, persistent, teamwork, all of these different types of things. So we'll look for that through your essays and your experiences in the interview, these types of attributes in students. I'm going to stop there and let people ask questions if they'd like. But this is my contact information. I am the one who answers this email, even though it looks like it's just, a generic email. That's me. So I'll answer email there if you have any questions in the future. I also just wanted to put in a plug. We have a monthly newsletter on our website. It's just once a month, so it's not like cluttering your inbox, but it's a great way to keep up with what types of things are going on in our program and what our students are doing. A student committee helps put that together. And then a lot of the articles are also posted on our website as a blog. And then you can also follow us on social media. We post somewhat regularly on most of these, more often probably Twitter and Instagram than Facebook, but definitely post on those as well to help see what's going on with our program. So yes, I want to see if I had more stuff, but I don't. We're good. We can stop there. I'll leave this up in case maybe people have questions or want to jot things down or the email. But definitely happy to answer questions about our program or if anyone has anything.
Yeah, so thank you, Dr. Williams. The remaining time, as she said, will be the Q&A. And you guys can also move freely among the other program breakout rooms to ask questions if you'd like. if you have a question about this program, please type it in the chat, or you can feel free to unmute yourself too and just ask it. But yes, yeah, if anyone has questions, go for it. So for those first few research blocks that you have before the clinical experiences, what will you be doing in those?
Yeah, so those lab rotations are really to find the fit for you for your PhD thesis mentor. So you'll select who you want to work with, but we help you. Of course, there's a lot of guidance that you'll get on who would be good to rotate based on your interests. We have 2 associate directors of graduate education who meet with our students and can help answer questions about like faculty in their interest area, give suggestions. You can of course find people through, online and things like that. You also meet with people throughout your interview and potentially a revisit that you can attend in the spring. And so that's also a way to get to meet faculty before you were to start the program. And you then select who you want to rotate with our help and guidance. And then you'll work in the lab. They're typically about 3 to 4 weeks, so they're not too long, but they're mostly full-time. You're not in courses or anything during that time. So that really helps you get, a feel of what it's like in that lab and to see if that lab and that mentor is a good fit for your training for your PhD. So you'll work there for that time, help assess that. We make everyone do 2 rotations just to have some options. But if you feel like you've done 2 and you still don't really know if either of those are a good fit for you for your PhD training, you can do additional rotations. We definitely have places that you can fit those in instead of doing something else that we might have had in the curriculum.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Okay, and it looks like I got a question about how many you accept per round of applications.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's what my slide I keep accidentally showing here kind of has. So this was a couple of years ago now, but this is kind of a pretty strong, like what the numbers look like. We have had an increase in applications. So the last few years, it's been more like 575 to 600 total applications that we receive. We send a secondary application to everybody. And then we try to interview. This has also increased because we've had more applications. We've increased that a little bit as well. So we have probably sent it closer to 120 interview invitations, and we've been interviewing closer to about 105 or so students the last 2 years. This number, though, is still pretty consistent. I would say somewhere between 40 to 50, maybe. I don't think we went all the way up to 50. Maybe 45 is actually pretty common, but how many students we end up admitting to get to the class size that we've got. So we fit between 15 to 16 students is kind of our current goal of class size. So that's what those numbers break down to. I think people will hear, 15 students isn't very many, which is actually we're on the larger side of MD PhD programs. A lot of them some of them are smaller, like 6 students or 8 or 10 students. Some of them are larger. There's a few programs that are more like 20 or 25. So it's kind of in the larger size of MD PhD programs, but I think people get nervous when they hear, oh gosh, only 15, in a class, that must be really hard to get in. But actually, when you look at like nationally, the percent of applicants who get accepted, we have much smaller numbers of actual applications than medical school. So even though the final class sizes are smaller than straight MD, there's a lot less applications. So I think that's also somewhat similar for graduate school. So the more or about an equal percent of the MD PhD total applicants will get accepted as for medical school. So it's not necessarily more competitive or harder to get in. It's just different applicant pool.
Awesome. And we have another, it's asking, how does the overall um, like schedule differ from other MD PhD programs of what you described in your first few slides?
Yeah, that's fine. Probably someone who's not there. Oh, here too, I talked about this. I forgot to put these slides at the end, but these are all the PhD programs that we offer too, since I kind of mentioned, we have 16 and these are them. The ones that are START are sort of the ones that are, well, I say less traditional, where I think the ones that are in like biomedical sciences are pretty much at any MD PhD program. Some of those other ones, if you're interested in those, are things you're going to have to be sure that programs that you apply to have those options. We'll do kind of a shortened version of the timing for the person who asked and anyone else who might have missed this. So we do the possibility of finishing the program in 7 years in our program. So it's just 1 year of preclinical preclinical content before going into clerkships. At most medical schools, that's going to be 2 years of information, or some of them may be 1.5. Ours is 1 year. It's 13 months, really. You start in July and then end in the next July. So that's 1 year preclinical content. And then you do your second year of clerkships or clinical care. We call that Foundations of Clinical Care. Those are going to be all your required clerkships that you have to do in surgery, medicine, pediatrics, OB-GYN, and psych and neuro. So you're going to do all of those in the second year before you go to graduate school. That allows you to get, a lot of early clinical exposure instead of having to wait all the way until after graduate school. And then after that, you'll do your PhD, which on average takes about 4 years. And then after that, you actually just do 1 more year of clinical electives. Our regular medical students have the same first 2 years, but then have 2 years of clinical immersion, or these clinical elective years, where a portion of one of them is a research project that our students don't have to do in the MD PhD program because they've gotten a whole PhD already. So we're able to cut down their time to training just a little bit with that. So it has the potential to finish in 7 years. Of course, it could, graduate school is unpredictable. So if it takes you a little bit longer, you certainly would still finish in 8 years, which is typical. So our students like that as well, that, 7 or 8 instead of maybe 8 or 9, like some programs might be.
I do have a quick question regarding the PhD. Are you restricted to only one department, or can you do your PhD in interdisciplinary departments?
Yeah, that's a good question. So at the end of the day, you definitely have to pick kind of one program that you're going to get your take your courses in, join their program and be a part of that graduate program. But a lot of these programs are kind of broad and have a lot of different like fields and like you mentioned, interdisciplinary, really, encompass really broad areas of research. We also will have faculty members who might be a part of many of the programs. So you might join a PI who could be in cancer biology or cell and developmental biology, and also maybe molecular pathology and immunology. And as a student, you could have the option of joining any of those programs by working in that faculty member's lab. So you'll have to, pick one and join it. But there's going to be a lot of different talks and seminars that you're going to hear, a lot of coursework that you have options to going to. You can also attend seminars and talks hosted by any of the programs, that you'd be interested in, or any research related to that. A lot of faculty members at Vanderbilt are also very collaborative. So even though you're going to join one lab and join a graduate program, you often will work with another lab. You'll often maybe even sometimes have a co-mentor, or be learning something from another PI. So there's a lot of that collaboration and interdisciplinary work that happens at Vanderbilt. Another perk about being in the MSTP that I think is kind of fun for our students is that we have, students across all of these 16 different graduate programs. And when they come to something like our seminar series, a lot of your seminars you'll go to are going to be like discipline specific, right? If you're interested in cancer research, you're going to go to cancer seminars and you're going to go to take courses in cancer. But in the MSTP, our seminar series is all of our students with all of their varied interests. And so through being in the program, you're going to hear talks from your fellow classmates that are in all of these other types of graduate programs as well. So they're going to talk about their research, and they're going to give journal club presentations about the fields that they're in. And so I think it's a really nice way to be exposed to all these different areas of science, and not just, the one area that you're interested in. And through those talks, I think our students oftentimes will find kind of a new connection, or their eyes will be open to something that they maybe didn't realize before, from something that's, a little bit outside of their field. And so I think that's really great as well. We also will have students that end up then collaborating and working together because they learned about something through their student talks that where they could benefit each other's science.
I have a question. I don't know if anyone's asked this already because I came in a little late, but so I'm like also considering, I'm trying to kind of decide between just doing an MD and MD PhD. So what do you think is kind of the benefits of doing like an associated program like this, where you get that PhD and an MD?
Yeah. So I think, if you, I think the one thing is you definitely have to want to do research. So if you think that you kind of like research a little bit and you're interested in it, but you aren't really sure that that's something that you want to be is like a very significant part of your career, then you certainly should not do an MD PhD program. Then I think MD is the better path. There are ways through an MD program to do research. Like I mentioned, in our curriculum, we have a 3 to 6 month research block that medical students do. A lot of medical schools will also have a full year where you can take an additional year to add to your training and do research for a year. So if you like research a little bit, you maybe want to be involved in research in your career, but you're not committed to spending 50 to 80% of your professional time doing research or running your own research lab, then that is certainly a good way to pursue that through medical school. We think if you want to do you want to have your own active research program, you want to run a research lab, you really love research, then being trained to do research through an MD PhD program is the better way to get that type of training. So, the PhD is 4 years of protected time to learn how to do research. You'll learn how to, write grants and set up research projects and think like a scientist, and really all of these important things that are just a little bit different than maybe just like thinking about science that you might learn through medicine. So we think that's really crucial. Something that our director likes to say too is that if you go the MD only route and you say, I'm just going to like pick up research along the way, you do at some point need to take time to learn how to do research. You're going to take a year probably in medical school. You might take a little bit of extra time in a fellowship to do a postdoc or some sort of research time. And all of those times are going to probably add up to a similar amount of time that you might spend doing your PhD. And in addition, you now have to like show people that you've taken time to learn how to do research, whereas with the PhD, they know that you've had that training. So we think it's just really kind of the best way to take dedicated, committed time to learn how to be a scientist as well as a physician, if that's the career path that you're interested in. But you do have to definitely like research. That's certainly an important aspect of it.
Okay, thank you so much. That really helps.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
How well do the students from this graduate program really get integrated to the other graduate programs that Vanderbilt may offer?
Yeah, that's a good question. So because our students are essentially in this dual degree program, they're probably more integrated than almost any other student on campus, because they are, in medical school for half your time, right? So the first 2 years, you really are with all of the other medical students for like 95% of your time. And so you get to know all of the medical students. You get to become a part of, the medical school. And then when you're in the lab, in the rotations, but especially when you join the PhD phase, you get to be a part of the graduate school. So you meet a bunch more people who are going to be in your research lab. You meet a bunch of other graduate students who are in your classes in graduate school. You'll meet students who are just in your graduate department, but maybe not in your year. So you really do get to know a lot of the other graduate students at Vanderbilt. The one thing is that I think it's not, there's still a little bit of a barrier. So when I kind of mention these programs, most of these are like biomedical sciences. So a lot of students maybe in these other biomedical sciences programs. And I think this is true at most schools, but you probably don't meet like a lot of students who would be in sociology or history or, students in other types of PhD programs, because you just aren't like in classes or seminars or working with them, right? You're just not seeing them. There are graduate school council, is that what GSE, a graduate school council and graduate student organizations where they're all of the graduate students at Vanderbilt. So there certainly are some opportunities to network and to socialize with, students in other disciplines. But you're just not day-to-day seeing them. Just like when you're probably a junior or a senior in your major, you're pretty much in undergrad with the people in your major, right? Not in all of the other majors. And so that's sort of a similar aspect here.
And so do you also know much about your new health policy PhD department?
I don't know a lot about like their I don't. I know they have a program. I'm trying to think, last year, I believe, was their first, I guess this fall would have been their first students in the PhD program started like this past fall. So they're finishing up their first year. It's a smaller program, so they take, I think, like 4 to 6 students. And there has been a master's of public health with a health policy concentration for a very long time. So they're certainly building upon that. There's a lot of researchers in health policy that you can work with, but I don't know a lot of other details about that. We do have one current student. She's a first year, so she'll join when she joins graduate school in another kind of year. She will join health policy. So we don't currently have an MSTP student in that one, but we will in about a year and a half or so from now when she joins.
Oh, it looks like someone put in the chat. Do you accept many students from out of state? Is there a difference between in-state and out of state for acceptance rates?
Yeah, that's a good question. We are a private institution, so we don't have any in-state or out-of-state preferences. Certainly we accept many people out of state, and we really think about our program as sort of a national program. We have people from all over. I would say it's probably like out of our 15 or 16 students, there's probably only about 1 or 2 who might actually be from Tennessee. So it's definitely people from all over. And that's true for the medical school as well, not just the MD PhD program and the PhD programs as well. So we don't have any sort of state preference or anything like that. Are you all, like what years are people in? You could put it in the chat or shout it out. Just curious kind of where people are in their training. All right, a good variety. Lots of sophomores, but then some others as well. Do people feel like you can do like here, I'll do gallery so I can see everybody. A raise hand, like the little, or not raise hand, but do like a thumbs up maybe reaction if you think you're interested in PhD programs. I just want to see what people think. Okay, perfect. And then let's pick a different one so I can tell it changed. How about the heart if you're interested in MD PhD programs? A few. And then let's do, I don't know, the clapping hands if you're interested in medical school. Cool. So there's definitely an interest, and I'm sure some people are, still deciding, right, or have a few more options available. Awesome. Happy to answer more questions, just getting a sense of where everyone is in their training.
So Dr. Williams, what did you do in grad school?
Yeah, I was in the neuroscience graduate program at Vanderbilt, and I studied animal models of addiction and stress. And so we're looking at circuitry involved in kind of like stress, and how stress often is a reason that people can relapse when they're in recovery from addiction. So I used mice and studied that. I really enjoyed being a student at Vanderbilt. I think Vanderbilt has, like I mentioned, a lot of collaboration, which I think really benefits you as a student. You can learn from a lot of other faculty members. People are really hopeful. I think both fellow students, but as well as faculty members, there's a lot of people willing to share ideas and resources and reagents and techniques and all of that. And so I think that is a big perk, where I don't think that's always the case at all institutions. Another thing that I really liked about Vanderbilt is in Nashville. So we're in Nashville, Tennessee, which is a really fun place to live. It's called Music City. So there is certainly a lot of music. I think people think of that as like country music, but it's not always country music. It's just in general music. There's a lot of songwriting and publishing for music in Nashville, and a lot of musicians come. So the person that you're going to have like singing live music in any venue that you go to is usually pretty good. There's a lot of live music. There's also, if you don't like music, there's a lot of nature too. Nashville is like, it's a city, but it's I don't know, small-ish city. I mean, it's certainly a city, but it's not like a huge, large city. And so it's got a lot of kind of rural nearby in the sense that there's like parks and hiking and things like that you can go do that aren't that far away. I think that's really enjoyable, and our students kind of like that ability to get away. It's growing and exploding a lot as well. Since I moved here 10 years ago, it's like just a completely different place. And so there's, tons of new housing and retail and fun restaurants and things like that. There's a lot of great food. There's a lot of I call them like festivals, but there's always like things going on. Like there's like a, festival thing, sometimes music, but sometimes art, sometimes just a little thing in a park, in your campus, or things like that you can kind of go to. So I certainly don't think our students are bored at all. I think we have nice weather in the sense that we still have the seasons, but we also don't get extremely cold. It's rare for it to snow in a meaningful way, and then that makes it really exciting if it does snow. But then it is hot and humid in the summer months, but not all year round. We do still have a really enjoyable spring. Like today, it's gorgeous spring and fall, and then winter doesn't get too cold, like I said. So I think Nashville is like a huge perk of Vanderbilt as well, getting to live and explore this city while you're here.
Has anyone been to Nashville before?
Doesn't sound like it. It's definitely a fun place. Oh, someone said yes. Yay. Good.
And yes, for anyone new who may be in the chat, y'all can feel free to ask any questions. We still have about 15 minutes or so until we have to wrap this up. So yeah, please ask any questions you may have.
I do have a quick question regarding, because I know you mentioned earlier that MD PhDs do 50 to 80% of their research. What do you think is the difference between just doing MD PhD and just normal PhD pathway?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think there's a couple of like reasons why someone might choose to pursue MD PhD versus PhD. I know I compare and contrast more with medical school. I think that's kind of the more common thing, but there are certainly people that are deciding between PhD and MD PhD. And that's actually probably more of a similar career path because like you said, you are spending more time doing research. I think one thing is just is seeing patients, right? So if you think that you are going to be perfectly happy doing research and never seeing patients, that's something that maybe you'd like it, but you just don't know that you need to do it. You probably don't need to do MD PhD. You probably could be totally fine with the PhD. If you think that seeing patients and spending time in patient care and being able to give back that way is really inspiring and special and important to you, then you have to go to medical school, right? There's no other way to do that really. I guess you could, as a physician, there are other types of careers where you can certainly work with patients. So that is, one difference if you feel like that's something you need. We also feel like a lot of our students will say that they feel like they're able to make sure that their research is really focused on the real problems in medicine. So they, trained as a physician, going to medical school really lets you know where those holes are and where those gaps are, and seeing your patients in the clinic helps you truly understand, what are the things that we need to fix? Like, what are the problems? Who are the patients that we can't help? And what do we need to know to help them better? So they think that they're able to, more carefully identify and tackle those problems that really need addressing than someone who might not have had that clinical training or that clinical exposure. So they feel like their research can be more able to potentially help patients in the future. So that's kind of one aspect. And they also just, I think that clinical training is going to be able to be more likely to help patients, be more relevant to patients. That doesn't mean you can't do really relevant research as a PhD either. But I think we certainly hear that having that definitely gives them a different kind of perspective sometimes. And so they appreciate that.
And as the assistant director for the MSTP program, do you still have time to do your own research that you did in grad school and stuff?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I actually don't do research anymore. I just full-time work for the MSTP. So I said we have 8 people on our team. 4 of them, including me, are like full-time kind of team members that do, administration of the program, right? We all have kind of different roles. We have a grants manager who does kind of financial grant things. We have a program manager who really helps students in kind of all aspects, but helps them organize a lot of their events that they do, make sure they get paid and registered, and a lot of those details. There's me, I do admissions and recruiting mostly. I run a summer program. I do outreach and communications and some other aspects that our students work on. And then we have another associate director who helps them with some kind of transitioning between medical school and graduate school and some programming related to that, and just a few other types of operational things. So the 4 of us are kind of more full-time in the program. And then we have our director and 3 associate directors, 2 that aid at the graduate phase. Those 2 are PhDs who have active research labs, and they really help students identify research mentors and help them on that path to graduate school. Help them if they come up with any issues, help them apply for grants, different things like that. And then we have another associate director who does kind of more of the clinical side, who helps with the clinical training and the program where you go back into the clinic throughout graduate school. He's actually an MD PhD, so he's a physician scientist who still sees patients and has a lab, actually an alum of our program. And then we have another our actual director is also an MD PhD So sees patients and has a research lab as well. So the 4 of them that have kind of still their research and their patients, they are less of their time is spent fully on the program, right? Because they have these other duties. And then the other 4 of us are able to help support them and the work that they do and their needs as well. And then our students. So there's 8 people, 4 full-time, 4 partial effort that really are there for anything that our students could need help with. I do really enjoy working with the students, though. That's certainly one of the reasons that I, decided to do what I wanted to do. I always liked education and working with students, and I still like being around science all the time and getting to hear about all the great things that our students are doing as well.
You mentioned your PhD was in neuroscience. What inspired you to kind of pursue neuroscience and why PhD?
Yeah, that's a good question. So originally in undergrad, I took a class in neuroscience. We didn't have a neuroscience major at my school, but we had a neuroscience intro to neuroscience class, and I took that and I thought it was just really interesting. So that was probably my very first exposure. And then I started working in a lab of someone who was a guest lecturer in that class. And that's how I kind of got into the research. I was in a lab a little bit previously for like maybe 2 semesters, and it was okay, but I didn't like it as much. And then I started working in this other lab and definitely was more interested in that work. Also, I think I had a better mentor. The whole experience was just better. And so I became really interested kind of because of the class, because of the research in the lab. But then also at the time, my grandparents both had Alzheimer's disease. And so that was also something where I kind of personally thought, oh, this is, a problem. It's something I may be interested in helping with. So those things were kind of what initially got me interested. I had always liked science. And like I said, I always liked teaching, education, working with students. But I think working in the lab made me realize that I really liked science maybe more than like teaching, especially I was thinking being like a high school teacher, then teaching would allow me to do, especially at the high school level. And so I decided to go to grad school because I really liked working in the lab. I like science. I kind of wanted to further that aspect, and went to grad school. I still really liked research, but I think what I decided throughout the end of grad school is that I didn't really want to run my own lab. I think I liked the idea of maybe doing more teaching at the college level or something like that. And then I found this position that I have now with the MSDP, and still really like it because I'm, working with students. I'm helping to train students in science and medicine, and then also get to be around, I guess, the science. But I'm okay. I feel good about my decision not to pursue further research, but definitely was certainly excited about it and wanted to be more involved when I made that decision to go to grad school. I think one thing about a PhD too, so the MD PhD program is very set up to like train people to be physician scientists where they're doing some combination of science and medicine and using their training. But one thing that a PhD does is it teaches you a lot of like critical thinking and problem solving and skills like that. And so from outcomes from graduate school, like the types of jobs that PhDs will pursue are really, really broad. So a lot of them will go into research, maybe in industry or in academia, like, medical centers, universities, but also some of them will do a lot of other things. Like there's like science writing, or there's consulting. There's a lot of administration, like jobs like I have that are, leading programs and things like that. There are just a lot of different types of careers that you can pursue with a PhD, and the types of training that you can get through that.
I had another question about your research that you did on the rats. What did you end up finding from the interplay between the stress and those addictions?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think about how to answer it. So basically it's kind of known that stress is one of the biggest reasons that people relapse from addiction. So there's stress, and there's 3 reasons: stress, and then there's like cue induced relapse. So like you might see something like a I don't know, a shot glass or something, like that kind of triggers, if you're like thinking about alcohol. And so that's kind of one reason. And there's a few other reasons, but those are kind of some of the biggest ones. So we know that stress is a big cause. And so we were looking at just the kind of some of the individual parts of the brain and the circuitry and signaling involved that might help be involved in that pathway. And we certainly, the kind of the brain region I was studying, it looked like that that brain region being activated definitely seemed to increase kind of the activity, and stress seemed to increase the activity. And then that would be more likely to increase activity in areas that lead to more kind of addiction or drug seeking behavior. So that's kind of what we found, without going into a lot of details of that.
And so that's for really just any general addiction. It's not specific.
Yeah, so I wasn't looking, our lab in general looks at alcohol and cocaine, but I was looking more at the stress part of it, like what stress does. And then because we're looking at regions of the brain that are really involved in addiction, it's kind of, we didn't do like the next step, which is more complicated, but to actually then say like, is it in certain types of addiction, but it would be likely to say that that's probably what happens.
Cool. And I had a quick question about any scholarships that you give to your matriculants.
Yeah, that's a good question. I should have mentioned that. So MD PhD programs are typically funded. So our program provides full tuition for students. So no tuition for either medical school or graduate school that they'll have to pay. And then it also provides a stipend to pay for living expenses for the whole time that you're in the program. So that's very similar to what PhD programs do. I know medical school, not typically the case, but MD PhD programs are certainly, we're trying to invest in training these students because we think that this is a really important career. So they receive full funding in stipend while they're in the program.
Arvin, you got any more questions?
Oh, I'm good. Thank you so much.
Get it? Okay.
All right, thank you.
I guess we can go ahead and end it, but thank you so much for all this information.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your symposium and conference, and enjoy your day.
Yeah. And Arvin, the keynote speech is in BSB D110. So yeah. All right. See you then.
Bye. Thank you.
I'm trying to figure out how to stop recording.
Oh yeah, I know. I was like, where's the end button here for me? Okay. Stop sharing my screen. There we go.